This morning I've got two content audits and analyses to share with you. The first one is of the Student Financial Services webpage on the MSU site, and the second one is ScreenSpace, which was recommended by Debbie. So the Student Financial Services page is a lot better than it used to be. It used to be a collection of random appearing links in the main content area, this section right here, and links on the left that weren't necessarily links to categories of information, but just discrete links. So the office has reorganized its website for the better, but it still suffers from some problems. So let me share the content audit with you first so that you can see what I found and how I organized it. I create my content audits in Excel just because that's an easier application for me to use than Word because the built-in columns, and as I demonstrated in class, I would usually create the content name in column A and then include a URL in column B if I needed to, if I was going to do something really in-depth. I'm not going to do something in depth, and you don't necessarily need to you don't need to create a content audit with URLs in it for your assignment number 5 either. So what I'm demonstrating here should be sufficient. So you can see that the Student Financial Services page has two main areas for its content. It has a left navigation area and a main content area. Just like for your assignment 5, you can ignore the MSU-wide links at the top of the page and all of those at the bottom of the page because we're interested in the service area, in this case, Student Financial Services, and in the case of assignment 5, the library services. So I've divided my audit then into those two main areas, the left navigation section and the main content area. So I've just simply listed all the links then in the left navigation, starting with SFS Campus Hub Home, which I believe is where we currently are on that page, down to Facebook, which is a link presented in a different way than the rest of the text links. So that's something to bear in mind down the road if you get a bit more involved in your content analysis and your redesign. Then we get to the main content area. So let me move my spreadsheet over just a bit and move the web page over just a bit so we can focus on that area. So this is an image that doesn't go anywhere and it's a static image. It doesn't change. And so then my eye traveled in this direction, started at the right and brought me down over this way, and so that's how I organized my audit. So I have the announcements with those 5 links listed here, the Did You Know section with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there were 6 links in that area. I didn't even know what to call this section right here, so I called it 4 squares with the links Know Your Costs, Resources, FAFSA, and Navigate the Process. Then there's an interesting college is affordable section. I like it. I think there's a lot of promise in it, but it's down here, bottom middle. And so here are the links within that section. And then we've got this dynamic area that switches between 2 links, Financial Aid TV and the Online Student Guide. And I can't get away from thinking about as seen on TV whenever Financial Aid TV displays, which is a problem for me on a university website. So that's the lay of the land, so to speak. That's the content audit. So once you've got the audit in place, you can proceed to analysis. In general, I like the way that the Financial Services Office has done more to categorize links. And generally you want to put the most important links closer to the top of the page and the least important links at the bottom of the page. And for the most part, that rings true. I think it's really interesting that personal financial management is really the first link in this left-hand section. and then financial aid programs, student charges and payments, important dates, e-services, cashier's office, and it proceeds from there. Some of these, like Maverick One Stop and campus information, I don't know if those links need to be on the page. Further, if you have a link like Maverick One Stop, that's something that users don't know exactly what it is, which is why the parenthetical information here is important. Knowledge base, ask a question. But in general, from an information architecture perspective and a page layout perspective, there are good things going on over on this left side of the page. And so I expect that if I click on this link that says personal financial management, I'm going to be brought to a page that is about personal financial management, and I also expect another subset of links to be presented to me on that page. Similarly with financial aid programs and student charges and payments, I expect that clicking on those links is going to bring me to a page that's about that content and has a number of other links related to that content for me to click on. Alright, so now let's look at the middle of the page, the main content area, and this is where I think that there's the most opportunity for redesign. As you know from the chapter on page layout, there's an important, a really important piece of this page is occupied by this graphic that doesn't do a whole lot. It's promotional, but in terms of helping users get to what they need to, it doesn't do a whole lot. So I'm not sure that this graphic is serving a very important purpose here. So the other main sections of this page are the announcements, the did you know, the 4 squares, the college is affordable, and then this section down here, which is really so distracting to me. I think it's there mostly for visual interest, really more so than providing a link to that information. So the information that's in this main content area looks a little bit scattered to me. For being an announcement section, announcements is something that you usually want to bring to your users' attention. So for being an announcement section, you know that anything that's over on the right-hand side of the page ends up being noticed, much less so than anything placed elsewhere on the page. So if you really want to bring your users' attention to announcements, it probably should be highlighted in a different way. It should be moved to a different area of the page that's more visible, and it should be highlighted. You can see that the default presentation of text on this page is the white background, black text, and then underline blue hyperlinks. So since all the announcements are presented in that default, no graphic interest, no different background color, the design of that section of the announcements doesn't work very well for the purpose of that section. So if those announcements truly are important for the users of the site to see, I would recommend highlighting them in a different way, moving them to the center of the page, moving them to go across the top of this main content area, moving them over to the left top side of the main content area. One of those options. Now, the Did You Know and Know Your Costs, Know Your Resources section utilizes color, a really different style for some of this information. And I'm a little conflicted about these two sections. On the one hand, I don't really know what they're supposed to be about. I'm not sure of the purpose they serve. It all seems like important information, but it's kind of buried in the presentation of it. So, did you know? Boy, talk about a nondescript heading. If I really wanted my users to click on information, I wouldn't use a heading of did you know, because did you know implies trivial information or underutilized nuggets of wisdom, and it implies things that users don't necessarily have a frequent need to access that would be more optimally placed and highlighted elsewhere on the page. So I'm a little skeptical of the function of that section in the first place. As well, I'm also a little skeptical of the four squares section. Know your costs, know your resources, navigate the processes, and start with FAFSA for financial aid. Part of my issue here is I don't know exactly what I can expect by clicking on these links. Know your costs. I assume that's information about the cost of attending MSU. So, tuition, housing, student fees. That's my best guess. Know your resources. Honestly, I would expect this link to bring me to a microcosm of this entire site because I expect student financial services to serve as my primary resource related to paying for college or at least understanding payment as it relates to MSU. Navigate the processes. This is where it starts getting really fuzzy for me. But I would think it has something to do with applying for financial aid, receiving notification, getting a bill, paying my bill. And then we have FAFSA, which if you're an undergraduate planning to go to college, you end up knowing what FAFSA means. So I think FAFSA is a pretty clear signal. So I think that there's potentially interesting information over here. I think it's arranged in a really odd way. The four squares don't really imply any type of sequence for digging into the information. And I think that if the four squares are intended to be a useful resource for students trying to understand the entire landscape of paying for college, I don't think the arrangement of the information here is useful. If I'm really supposed to start with FAFSA, that's the lower left side of the quadrant. And so if that's where I'm supposed to start, that's a counterintuitive place. So I would probably need to dig more into these areas to truly understand what they're about to propose an alternate presentation of this information. If it is important, I would take it out from being in this right-hand side of the area. And if it is supposed to be a guide about about everything involved in paying for college, I would arrange it differently and not in the pattern of these four squares. Now remember how I said I was of a split mind about this information? Since it's over on the right-hand side and since it's colored and a little bit reminiscent of the advertisements that are these days typically being displayed on the right-hand side of the page, they end up being a little more hidden. And so since their purpose isn't exactly clear and it's not priority one information, maybe it's okay that it's hidden. If I was working on this site for assignment 5, I would certainly click into these areas to make sure I understood what they were about. It looks like know your costs were what I anticipated. Know your resources is about different types of aid. I really hate that link name. Maybe how to pay for college would be a better title for that one. Navigate the processes is also what I anticipated, and start with FAFSA. So an MSU page all about FAFSA. I think the information in this section is actually really important, vitally important, particularly for undergrads, also for graduate students. So, although anything that has to do with FAFSA